Hello and welcome back to Pigeon Kart Club, still on the 13th of March 2022. Round 1 of the two Counties Kart Club Championship still in progress. Now it is time for the Senior Blues to take to the track to kick their season off. They're all lined up on the grid, raring to go. They've had their 3 heats earlier today. Heat 1 was won by Paul Alexander, but both heat and second place Tom Parker were disqualified for coming in underweight. The weight limit has dropped for this year and a few drivers pushing it just a little bit too close. It's going to leave Mike Bell to take the win ahead of Ron Schoen, Steve Groves, Martin Wheeler and Joey Foster making up the top 5, with Anthony Cleal, Kevin O'Neill, Chris Underhill, Robin Stones and Paul Dybel completing the top 10. Heat 2 was also won by Mike Bell, this time after a good battle with Joey Foster. Paul Alexander would finish 3rd ahead of Rob Mortimer and Sylvain Bessier, pipping home both Chris Underhill and Kevin O'Neill, 5th, 6th and 7th. John Hartshorn in 8th ahead of Robin Stones, and in 10th place the number 64, the novice Alex Kemp in his first ever race day. So a good performance for the high-flying novice to complete the top 10. And in Heat 3, Martin Wheeler would take the win ahead of Mike Bell, denying Bell the clean sweep. Anthony Cleal is going to be up into 3rd after having to switch over to a backup chassis after cracking it in Heat 1. Paul Alexander 4th once again ahead of John Hartshorn and Kevin O'Neill. Chris Underhill 7th ahead of Rob Mortimer, Ron Schoen and Phil Shears completing the top 10 in his brand new comp car. That will set the grid as it lines up, Mike Bell leading us away, but Joey Foster absent from the grid for the final. He picked up an injury and then in his own words has wimped out of the final, so everyone else gets to move up a spot. And joining Mike Bell on the front row is Kevin O'Neill, the number 11, ahead of Martin Wheeler and Chris Underhill, with John Hartshorn and Rob Mortimer separated on tiebreak 6th and 7th ahead of Ron Schoen, Anthony Cleal and Paul Alexander rounding out the top 10. Steve Groves in 11th, pipping Robin Stones by tiebreak ahead of Paul Dybel, with Sylvain Bessier and Mike Watts rounding out the top 15. Adrian Help 16th ahead of Alex Kemp, with Phil Shears and Tom Parker coming from down the back. No starts from David Waldron, Chris Lord and Sarita Schoen. Bit of a shame for that, and hopefully we'll see them back out soon. But for now, we're on board with Steve Groves, number 19 in the Cosmic. He's moved up to 10th place on the grid, thanks to the non-start from Joey Foster. As around buttons we go, and up towards Pit Bend. 10 minutes plus a lap of racing in store for the Senior Blues as around top bend they go. It's Bell and O'Neill leading the pack. Now we're on board with Martin Wheeler, keeping right close to the bumper of Bell. Now we look for the lights. Here we go. And away we go, and it's a good start from Bell. Wheeler's gone with him. O'Neill in 3rd ahead of Underhill, and it's Mortimer and Hartshorn side by side. But into turn 1, Wheeler's got his nose up the inside of Bell. They're going to run side by side through Billy's blind and into the chicane. Wheeler takes the lead from Bell, O'Neill, Mortimer. Then it's Underhill and Cleal, and that's Tom Parker off in the background. He's going to get it back on. Through goes Adrian Helps, Alex Kemp and Mike Watts, but Parker back on up the road. Now on board with Paul Alexander, he's right in the mix. Number 19 in front of us is John Hartshorn going through the horseshoe. And Hartshorn's caught the curb and he's gone around. John Hartshorn off onto the infield. He's going to get pointed back the right way and get on up after the pack, but not the first lap Hartshorn will want. At the end of it though, it's Wheeler leading from Bell. Then comes O'Neill, Mortimer, Anthony Cleal and Chris Underhill side by side. And Cleal going to carry the momentum through on Rob Mortimer and also on Kevin O'Neill, so Cleal passes 3 karts in the blink of an eye, and up into 3rd goes the defending champion. Now we're on board with Paul Alexander. He's going to slide one up the inside of Chris Underhill as well, who's now got Ron Schoen on his tail. Further back, that's Bessier and Shears on the back of Paul Dybel. But up into the lead, it's Wheeler leading from Bell, then Cleal. Now we're on board Tom Parker, number 15. Number 8 ahead of us is Phil Shears. They both started from the back. Now they're pressuring Paul Dybel as they go round top bend. Down the straight they go, and Shears moves up alongside Dybel. Very close in the mid-pack. But back up to 4th. It's O'Neill leading. Oh, and a spin! As Alex Kemp's gone around. Mike Watts has done a good job to avoid him. Kemp's going to get it pointed back the right way. Hartshorn goes through. Also there's Steve Groves making a move on Ron Schoen in the mix, in the hairpin. And on the way out, Tom Parker now looking all over the back of Paul Dybel. Shears has made it through. Now on board, Sylvain Bessier, number 14, going to go up the inside of Robin Stones in Pit Bend. Stoddart Stone's going to run wide, and through goes Vessia, but across the line, Alexander looking at the back of O'Neill. Steve Groves on Chris Underhill as well. The 3 orange helmet drivers lead this train through the chicane. And on the way out, Alexander's got the run against Kevin O'Neill, up into the horseshoe, and down the inside, and through goes Paul Alexander, making the move stick. That's for 4th spot for the number 5, but the queue behind is getting ever bigger. That's Phil Shears on Robin Stoddart Stones, and that's Tom Parker breaking down. So a problem there for Parker, is going to cut his final short, but through top bend they go. Back on board once again with Steve Groves. Number 82 in front of us is Chris Underhill. Groves going to look to the inside for Billy's blind. Nothing doing there though. Underhill stays in front. Alexander trying to break away. Then comes O'Neill, Mortimer, Underhill, Groves, Schoen and Vessia. Now on board with Vessia up Sturmey Straight. Going to pull back in behind Ron Schoen for the hairpin. So close you can throw a blanket over all of them. And now Vessia up the inside into the horseshoe. Good move from Vessia. That's 9th spot. But into top bend they go. Once more, Robin Stoddart Stones and Phil Shears on the back of that train. As John Hartshorn making the move on Adrian Helps through the infield. Mike Watts in close proximity as well. Down into Billy's blind. O'Neill, Mortimer, Underhill, Groves, Vessia, Schoen, Shears and Stoddart Stones. That's 5th to 12th all in a line. Now we're on board with Vessia side by side in front. Groves looking to the outside. Vessia is going to fill the gap and they're going to run side by side through the infield. The 3 different OTK brands battling it out. Tony Kart leading the Cosmic, leading the Esprit. Then behind is Schoen, Shears and Stoddart Stones. Round top bend they go. Vessia, you can see, looking on the attack against Groves. Groves likewise against Underhill. Down the straight we go. Nothing doing into Billy's blind this time by. Now through the chicane. O'Neill, Mortimer, Underhill. And that looks like a good run for both Groves and Vessia. Nothing happening though at the other end of the Sturmey Straight. They go now into the infield. Vessia looking left and right over the back of Steve Groves. Robin Stoddart Stones closing in against Ron Schoen at the back of that train. And both of them looking all over the back of Underhill still. They're going to exit the top bend. Vessia's missing a little bit of top end, so Groves and Underhill both going to get away slightly. There's Martin Wheeler, he's leading the race ahead of Bell and Cleel, and that's Robin Stoddart Stones up the inside of Ron Schoen in Billy's blind. Now through the chicane, we're on board with Groves. Ahead of us is Underhill, and Groves is going to go down the inside. Good move by Steve Groves, and Sylvain Vessia has followed him through. Now they're going to run side by side through into the horseshoe. Underhill's not going to give that one up, and he's going to be back on their tail. Phil Shears closing them in. As Kevin O'Neill still holding off the rest of the pack. Now we're on board with Martin Wheeler. Coming out to put a lap on both Adrian Helps and Alex Kemp. That's the battle for 16th. And Kemp makes the move on Helps at the same time. And you can see there Bell and Anthony Cleel really closing the gap. Cleel as well closing in on Bell as they go down the inside of Adrian Helps into pit bend. And that's Phil Shears making the move on Chris Underhill in the hairpin. And Vessia going to launch a move against Groves at the horseshoe. So moves all aplenty in the midfield. Now Vessia has his eyes set on Rob Mortimer in front of him. You see Phil Shears coming from the back of the grid, definitely on a good run so far. There's Bell passing Alex Kemp, but in behind Anthony Cleel sets the new fastest lap of the race. So Cleel closing that gap right down on Bell. They're almost bumper to bumper as they go through Buttons and up towards pit bend. There's Wheeler in the lead, ahead of Bell, ahead of Cleel, as they're going to open now down onto the straight. Cleel's going to get the run. They're going to go side by side down through the kink into Billy's blind. Cleel gets the inside for the kink, but he's on the wrong side for Billy's. Bell's going to shut the door and hold it shut. As to the chicane, now the number 3 ahead of the number 1. The top 2 in the club championship last year, and now they're coming up to put a lap on number 32, Mike Watts. And Bell's going to try and go tight, and he's going to bog down. And through goes Anthony Cleel into the horseshoe. You're not going to give Anthony Cleel a chance like that, and he is, and expect him not to follow through. Cleel up to second, Bell down to third. Now what can either of them do about Martin Wheeler? Now back to the battle for 5th is Kevin O'Neill holding off Sylvain Vessia at the moment. Steve Groves tucked up tight behind, and O'Neill's going to run wide. He's going to run tight for buttons, and that looks like Vessia's got round the outside of him, and sure enough he has, so Vessia up into 5th spot. There's the proof as number 14 on the straight is ahead of us. O'Neill's closing back in though, and he launched a counter-attack into Billy's blind. Nothing happening there, but this group of 5 still bumper to bumper. We're back on board with Paul Alexander doing everything he can to get up past Adrian Helps. He's really getting away from this pack, as in behind there's Vessia, and he's going slowly out of the corner. And that's a problem for Sylvain Vessia, up to 5th, and now he's going to be touring it back in unless he can fix the problem. Doesn't look like it, and Vessia through goes Robin Stones. Ron Schoen's going to go by as well, and Vessia pulls off and out. Now back on board with number 12, Rob Mortimer. Ahead of us is Steve Groves. And Groves looking to the inside of Kevin O'Neill, but O'Neill runs a little bit wide, carries the speed, and is still ahead on the way into the chicane. 2 minutes or so left on the clock. There's Martin Wheeler catching up with Paul Dybel. Anthony Cleal putting a lap on John Hartshorn in behind, and Cleal inching that gap closer and closer. As Wheeler now gets the run out of the chicane on the way up the Sturmey Straight, he's going to pull ahead of Paul Dybel. Round the hairpin. And now up in towards the horseshoe. Open track for Wheeler. Now can he reopen that gap? Cleal makes it through, but Bell doesn't, so Bell is going to be losing some time. Meanwhile, back with O'Neill, Groves, Shears has passed Rob Mortimer, so Phil Shears now up into 7th. In behind, that's Robin Stones on the back of Chris Underhill. It's down into the hairpin they go. And Robin Stones down the inside of Chris Underhill. He's going to run wide though, and Underhill's going to switch back, and Underhill's going to get back in front for the horseshoe. Good battle between them. Is now on board with Steve Groves looking to the inside of Pit Bend. He's going to make it through past Kevin O'Neill, and Phil Shears is going to follow him through. So Phil Shears in the comp car is through, and that's a problem. Martin Wheeler is off, and Martin Wheeler is out of the race from the lead. Heartbreaking for Wheeler. But the race doesn't stop as we're back on board with Kevin O'Neill. Ahead of us, Phil Shears looking to the inside of Steve Groves. And they're going to touch in the hairpin. O'Neill's going to get a tight exit and run it 3 wide down towards the horseshoe. And he's going to be hung out to dry, and Rob Mortimer's going to slide up the inside. So Rob Mortimer makes the move ahead of Kevin O'Neill. They're all passing the strip and Wheeler. They're all going to move up a spot, so this is going to be a battle for 4th now. As across the line we go, it's Groves ahead of Shears. Then Mortimer and O'Neill right bumper to bumper with them. Coming close to the end of the race now, 15 seconds left on the clock. As there is Paul Dybel defending from John Hartshorn. Back on board with O'Neill down the Sturmey Straight once again. The group in front, a little less exciting this time, and Steve Groves just covering his bases. Phil Shears is going to have to do something to get around him. And then Mortimer and O'Neill looking to close in behind. Back on board with Alexander. He's getting up close and personal with Alex Kemp. Put a lap on him. So we've got Alexander up into 3rd spot now. As into Top Bend they go. There's Anthony Cleal, the race leader, coming up to take the last lap board. Into Billy's. The fight still going on between Groves and Shears. Mortimer and O'Neill as well. There's the proof across to take the last lap board. We're on board with Mike Bell. He's going to be behind Ron Schoen and slide it up the inside on the exit of Billy's into the hairpin. Now the battle for 4th through the infield section. Robin Stones still attacking against Chris Underhill. Then it's race leader Anthony Cleal in behind. Half a lap to go for him to take the win. He's got a bit of a gap to Bell, so he's probably going to let this play out in front of him as Stones has a think about it into Top Bend. Meanwhile in Billy's, Groves and Shears bumper to bumper still. But across the line to take the win for round 1 of the Two Counties Kart Club Championship 2022, Anthony Cleal starts his season as he finished the last with a season race win. Mike Bell's going to be 2nd. Paul Alexander is going to be able to take his time and enjoy his way to 3rd spot. As across the line goes the Mad Croc, and in behind Groves and Shears, it's still up for grabs. Stones and Underhill still battling away, but across the line it's Groves ahead of Shears. Mortimer holds off Kevin O'Neill, and then it's just going to be Underhill and Stones racing to the line. And the results are going to stand. Anthony Cleal takes the win, 2 1/4 seconds ahead of Mike Bell, with Paul Alexander in 3rd. Steve Rose going to hold off Phil Shears for 4th and 5th ahead of Rob Mortimer, Kevin O'Neill, Chris Underhill, Robin Stones and Ron Schoen completing the top 10. Paul Dybel's 11th ahead of John Hartshorn ahead of Mike Watts. Alex Kemp, the novice, finishes his first final in 14th. Adrian Help's going to be 15th, and Martin Wheeler, Sylvain Bessier and Tom Parker are going to be not making it to the flag, with non-start for Joey Foster, Dave Waldron, Chris Lord and Sarita Schoen. What that will do to the championship, it's going to look like this coming out of round 1. Mike Bell leads the way ahead of Anthony Cleal. Kevin O'Neill in a strong third ahead of a 3-way tie with Alexander, Mortimer and Underhill. Steve Rose 7th ahead of Ron Schoen and John Hartshorn, with Martin Wheeler 10th ahead of Robin Stones, Phil Shears, Paul Dybel, Joey Foster and Mike Watts complete the top 15. Going to be ahead of Alex Kemp, Adrian Helps, Sylvain Bessier, Tom Parker and David Waldron. Now that's not all that was up for grabs today in the blue subclasses. First up, the blue Masters standings. As you can see there, Mike Bell and Anthony Cleal going over the scales. Anthony Cleal is going to be leading the blue Masters standings by a single point ahead of Kevin O'Neill. Paul Alexander, Rob Mortimer and Chris Underhill tied once again ahead of Steve Groves. Ron Schoen and John Hartshorn are going to be ahead of Robin Stones and Joey Foster to complete the top 10. Phil Shears 11th ahead of Paul Dybel, Mike Watts, Alex Kemp and Adrian Helps. And in the blue veteran standings, it's going to be Anthony Cleal and Kevin O'Neill sharing the lead, 6 points apiece. They're going to be ahead of Paul Alexander and Chris Underhill on 9 points each, with Steve Groves and Rob Mortimer also tied. Ron Schoen and John Hartshorn likewise, as are Phil Shears and Robin Stones making up the top 10. So 5 pairs of drivers ahead of Paul Dybel. And in the blue legend standings, it's Kevin O'Neill sweeping the day ahead of Chris Underhill, with Robin Stones, Ron Schoen and John Hartshorn all even on 8 points, ahead of Mike Watts, Adrian Helps, with Chris Lord and David Good yet to kick off his season. And in the blue top weights, it's Rob Mortimer leading the way ahead of Ron Schoen, with Phil Shears from the back of the grid coming up, and he's going to be in 3rd spot ahead of Paul Dybel, Mike Watts, Adrian Helps and Tom Parker. The 2 Counties Kart Club Championships going to be on hold for a couple of months, their next round at Forestedge. However, the Formula Blues are moving on to the Blue Challenge, and that will be in a couple of weeks from Mansell Raceway. So until then, goodbye.